If you've been a regular viewer here, or you've seen my old 5 o'clock show over recent years, or read my stuff in The Australian and seen me on Sky over the past decade, you'd know one of my constant themes is our energy madness, the manifest self-harm of taking an energy-rich country and deliberately creating an electricity price and supply crisis. And one thing I've constantly pointed out with relevant facts, examples and highly credentialed experts is that what the politicians promise us, what they're promising to do, that is give us energy that is cheap, reliable, plentiful and renewable, is just not possible. It's so obvious. Everyone has tried to deliver this around the world and no one has succeeded. But our politicians are all science and reality deniers. They are pretending they can do what no one has done. Well, today, a breath of fresh air. The former CEO of Snowy Hydro, Paul Broad, has been talking about the delays and cost blowouts to the Snowy 2.0 project, and he's spoken frankly about the renewable energy push, telling 2GB's Ben Fordham exactly how bad it's all looking.
The notion that you can have 80% renewable in our system by 2030 is, to use the vernacular,
Yes.
is bullshit. It's bullshit. You can't. And the truth is, we need this transition. If it ever occurs, it will take 80 years, not 8.
Crude language, but that is the crude fact of the matter. Now, Paul Broad went on to say, we've already closed down too much dispatchable power. Yeah, we all know that on this program. He says he'll be surprised if the lights don't go out whenever we get high demand in the future. And he said we desperately need more gas-fired generation. And he told Ross Greenwood earlier tonight on Sky News that we cannot afford to close any more coal generators, not until we have reliable energy to replace them.
Closing Liddell is bad enough. Can't close Eraring, and they can't close Vales Point. They need to stay much longer. Ross, they are dreaming if they think they can have 80% renewables by 2030.
They are. Tell them they're dreaming. Yeah, this is a lesson in the bleeding obvious in many ways, but our politicians continue to ignore it. They just go with slogans and spin.
We've got an ambitious, comprehensive plan to get more cleaner and cheaper energy into the system. And the budget that I hand down on Tuesday night will have cleaner and cheaper energy at the very core of our plans to grow the economy.
It's always supposed to be getting greener and cleaner and more abundant, but we never see that. We get the opposite. If only we could generate power from political spin, we'd never run out then, the ultimate renewable resource. This is the nation's biggest self-made crisis, and the debate about it is about an inch deep.
So we are staring to the abyss, and trying to get a honest, rational conversation about that is very difficult at the moment.
Spot on. His comments were triggered, of course, as I mentioned at the outset, by revelations about Snowy 2.0, how it won't be finished now until 2029 and how the cost continues to blow out. I've taken this up with Bruce Mountain from Victoria's Energy Policy Centre, asking if Snowy 2.0 will ever actually boost the nation's energy security.
I think the answer has long been no. When it was commissioned, or when they said they were going to proceed, they said it would take 4 years to develop. It's now 4 years later, and they're saying it's going to take 7 years to develop. Every year, the time to complete has been rolling and getting longer. So I think there are genuine questions as to whether it ever will be completed. I think we said at the outset, this is an extraordinarily risky project. You don't build pumped hydro like this with such enormously long tunnels. The next longest of similar capacity is about a quarter as long, and that's the next longest in the global stack of them. Most of them are a much smaller length. This was very risky, partly because of the fact that it was in a national park, had such long tunnels, but also enormously risky because of the transmission augmentation, crossing over valuable farmland, likely to encounter opposition, which is exactly what we are seeing. So it struck us as as a daft thing to proceed with at the outset, and an indictment on our energy regulators and on our institutions for failing to call it out in no uncertain terms.
So why did it happen?
I think it happened because Malcolm Turnbull was in a tight spot and wanted to declare a nation-building project which would buffer him during a difficult place. It's all in the name, Snowy 2.0.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because you were calling out almost a year ago the cost blowout here. It was initially costed at $2 billion. A year ago, you were predicting this would blow out to over $10 billion. We've had increasing problems, more delays, more references to costs now. You've said there's a possibility it might never be completed. But what's your best estimate as to what the ultimate cost would be if it is completed?
Well, they claim they have a fixed price contract for a bit over $5 billion and a variation to it that would allow it to go up to $5.9 billion, or that's their claim. We know of claims from the contractors so far for a further $2.2 billion as of about a year ago. Who knows what additional claims they will have now? The main contractor went bankrupt. I think they've got Snowy Hydro in a corner, as in if you don't, meet our terms, we can cease work, and who else is going to actually take it over from there? So I would love to know the detailed costings and the variations. None of it's in the public domain, sadly. Quite why? Because this is a taxpayer-funded project. It ought to have been in the open way earlier. But to be honest, I doubt the project itself will be built for $10 billion. Every time we've been on the edge of this thing, at least in the public domain, saying it's going to cost more, and every time we've underestimated, I think it may well cost more. And then the transmission that they have justified off the back of this project is another $10 billion. And who knows, that may well end up costing, more too.
Would we be better off as a nation cutting our losses, not spending any more money on this, protecting the national park from transmission lines and the like, and spending some of that money on additional gas peaking plants?
We've been saying for quite some time we need an inquiry, independent inquiry. You can't ask Snowy to do it, on whether we are throwing good money after bad. We've been banging that drum right from the outset with the previous government, with this government. Sadly, this government, which had a golden opportunity when they came in to say we're going to have a second look, hasn't done that yet. They are pressing Snowy to be more transparent. We haven't seen that yet. Snowy said they're going to cough up the detail. Well, let's see when and if they do.
Now, the former CEO of Snowy 2.0, Paul Broad, has lashed out not just at the way he's been treated and the project's been treated, but he's lashed out at the federal government's net zero goals. He's saying that it's a pipe dream to get to 80% renewables by 2030. Here's some of what he said to Ross Greenwood.
There's this false narrative coming out there that somehow this transition is all in place and somehow it's all going to work seamlessly. It's not. It's no way near it. Nowhere near it. Snowy 2.0 will have a significant part, but it'll be nowhere near enough to what needs to be done. And the transmission lines that need to be built, man, you've got to build lots of gas plants. The short-term answer, if you want to start closing the baseload powers, you're going to need lots of gas. You need to access it.
Bruce Mountain, is he right on the diagnosis and the cure?
I'm afraid I'm loath to take too much advice from Mr. Broad. I think he ought to be held accountable in no small part for Snowy 2 in the advice to the previous Prime Minister who took it. So I think the blame is to be shared. On his more general point, the energy transition is no mean feat. I think too many have too easily said this thing can be done in a jiffy and it's easily done. It's not easily done. It's a major challenge. I'm positive on the technologies. They exist. The fundamental ways of producing energy from clean resources exist. They're cost effective. And now with energy storage and batteries, we know we have a cheap alternative. But I think I share his concern that it's a sizable challenge, but I'm afraid we part company on other aspects.
Just finally, Bruce, what about the impact of Snowy on electricity prices in this country? Can you quantify that?
I think if Snowy is not built, we have the best chance of saving money. If Snowy is built, prices will be higher than they otherwise would be. Snowy can, if it's built for 10 billion, and the transmission associated with it, which otherwise would not have been built, as another 10 billion, and we could have done that a lot cheaper. We can imagine, like saving 15 billion, we could achieve everything that Snowy was going to do for a fraction of the price. So I think the price impact challenge now it might well be to ensure that it's not built.
Bruce Mountain, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What an absolute disaster. Your money, your energy grid, and it's an absolute disaster. Thank you very much, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.